So welcome to our second episode of Senior Moments. I'm Michelle Runyon, Director of Community Engagement for Hunk Community, and with us today, we'd like to welcome Bob Desmond. Hi, Bob.
Good morning. Good to see you.
Now, Bob, you're a resident here.
Yes,
How long have you been living here?
8 years.
It's been 8 years.
Yes,
And I remember it actually because it was right about the time you moved in when I was starting to develop the veterans programming here.
yes.
And you were so helpful to me. Actually, you became my consultant in that. And I was following your lead on so many things because you are, in fact, or I think you've recently retired as the commander for the New Hampshire chapter of
The Korean War
Korea.
veterans. Yes.
So you're the commander until, are you still, or did you just?
I'm still the commander.
So you're the
because
commander
no
of
one
the.
wants to take over.
Because nobody wants that job.
Yeah.
And you are yourself, I know you're very humble about this, but you are a war hero. You are a decorated war hero
I'm disabled.
from your time in Korea.
Yes.
And so because of that, you and I have worked very closely together to develop a beneficial program for the residents, the veterans here at Hunt Community, and also our At Home by Hunt members. So in our time together while we were sharing and developing that program, you also shared a story with me that really will stay with me forever because it was so impactful. And what you had shared was that you had a very small part in the whole episode of the Iran hostage crisis.
Yes.
The president at the time was Jimmy Carter, and Jimmy Carter allowed the Shah of Iran into the United States, and that's really what set things off
Oh,
with the hostage taking. And do you know how those hostages were treated?
at the time I didn't know, but later on in life,
Right, because you then
I had a chance to meet one of the hostages, and he told me the stories of what went on there, some of the things that happened.
can you share a little bit about the horrendous conditions that they were?
Well, in particular, for example, for 3 months, they never took showers. They were just there. And when the government, the state government tried to save them, they had a mishap in the desert, and the fighters didn't work, so the Iranian government took over, and they took the hostages and put them in different prisons, so they couldn't come and get them.
They had moved them around.
They moved around to different prisons, so they couldn't come and rescue them. They took over from the students who took over the numbers. I was told that.
There were other stories that came out subsequent to the release of the hostages that said there was solitary confinement.
There's a story about one of the gentlemen that I met. I don't know whether you want to tell me now.
Yes. What?
It was Colonel Tom Schaefer.
Yes.
Later on, I met him, and in Phoenix, and he told me the story about him being in the prison, and he went to take a shower. The Iranian people don't like men to shake hands or do things like that or hug each other. They're not into that. So when he went to take a shower, he looked up and he saw there was a camera on him. So he mooned them.
He was going to get them,
He was
right?
gonna get
Yeah,
them,
he was.
so
He
he
was
moved
gonna,
them.
whatever he could do. That was the most that he could do. But how long was he in solitary?
He was because of that, they put him in solitary confinement for 90 days.
For 90 days.
And in our conversation, he said it was well worth it.
Now, your role in this crisis comes on the day of the release of the 52 remaining hostages.
Yeah, they released on the 20th. We got involved on the 21st.
Can you tell us about the role that you played in the release of the hostages?
Well, we knew they were coming home and the date and the time and everything.
You knew because you're an air traffic controller. So where were you stationed?
At the time, I was stationed in what we call an Air Traffic Control Center. It's called Boston Air Traffic Control Center, located here in Nashville, New Hampshire. It moved up from Boston in 1963 to Nashville. And we were preparing for him to come. And so 2 or 3 of the controllers says, we should do something for them. They're coming here. And this was on a Sunday, January 21st. So around 7 o'clock in the morning, we said, what can we do? What can we do? And one of them says, let's tape a song so when they come in, we can pipe it into the aircraft. I decided I'd call my wife and have her tape a song. So she taped America the Beautiful. And my daughter at the time, my daughter Terry, drove it over to the control center here. And we prepared to get ready to pipe it into the aircraft once we got to talking to him. And we knew what time he was coming and the altitude, where, and everything like that. So I assigned one of the controllers I knew. He had a baritone voice and really powerful. And I said, you're going to greet the aircraft, Freedom 1.
The aircraft named Freedom 1.
Freedom 1 was the call sign.
Holding the Iran hostages.
They had 52 hostages.
Was on this aircraft.
Yes.
And they were coming into U.S. airspace.
Yes. Yeah.
And
it happened around, I believe it was around 1:30, and Frank greeted them as they come into it. And this is quite interesting, because Frank said, you've just crossed into the United States of America, 80 miles north of Bangor, Maine, at 31,000 feet. He said, welcome home. And the pilot come back and said, thank you very much. And then Frank come back and said, we would like to pipe a song into the aircraft so the people can hear it. And the pilot said, go right ahead. So all the controllers were gathered around with this on their speakers listening, and we piped in America the Beautiful into the airplane. After a while, the pilot come back and said, there's not a dry eye in the airplane. And Frank come right back and said, there's not a dry eye in the control room floor.
I can't even imagine what it was like
It
hitting
was
U.S.
very-
airspace
it was very emotional.
and I'm
Yeah.
sure.
And normally they fly jet routes to the destination, but we carried the aircraft direct to Newburgh, New York, Stewart Air Force Base, because that's where it was landing to meet their families. They had their families there.
Yes.
And so we cleared it direct instead of taking a different way.
And no one knew that they were going to be there.
No one
Only
knew.
only the control tower knew.
Yeah, well, the control tower,
Yeah.
the airport knew it. And I was getting calls, and I don't know how the news people got our telephone number because it's restricted. It's only for certain people. And I kept getting calls from news people, oh, where are they? We want to know. And I tell them, I can't tell you.
Bob, what do you have there? What's that?
This is very interesting. It's a wonderful. This is called a flight strip. And on this flight strip, we put the information of the aircraft that we're controlling. The altitude, where the route of flight it's taken on, its call sign and everything. And as the aircraft goes over certain areas on its route of flight, like say from, in this particular case, Freedom 1, coming from Shannon to Newburgh, it had the call sign, Freedom 1, and the aircraft type, and everything like that, and how it's getting there by the route of flight it's flying on. And then we use these to control the airplane as it goes over a fix. They report I'm going by this, and we say Roger, and they go by this, and this is how we follow the airplane. Once it gets airborne, they'll be put numbers on here and everything. We'll put the altitude in there, we'll put the time it's flying and everything, and mark it as they go. So they controllers follow it all the way, of course.
And what you're holding is the actual strip from the hostage,
Yep,
the freed hostage's plane.
yes, it was called Freedom One.
Freedom One. So this is the actual.
That's true. Yeah, there were two others, but I got one of them, and I've had it ever since.
Wow, that's amazing.
It's amazing. This is what we used.
They greeted their families at West Point. Is that true?
Yes, yeah. Unknown to a lot of people, Ronald Reagan allowed Jimmy Carter to greet them when they arrived in Germany, and that was
Oh,
a
in
big
Germany,
surprise.
yes.
And we knew about that too in the control room because it was, they call them SAM, S-A-M, Special Air Missions. And when we knew it was going over to Germany, we knew who was on board.
Mm.
And we went over and greeted them. And that was, I'm sure, a very exciting thing for President Carter.
Yes. That alone, just that, is a beautiful story. You know, you and I have known each other for so many years and we've talked about so many things, but this is just my favorite of all of the stories that you've shared with me because it's just so emotional.
Everybody was involved. My family was involved.
Yes.
All the controllers were excited. It was just it was a real happy day for everybody.
And then 20 years later?
2014.
So, okay, so decades later,
Yeah,
you had a miraculous meeting.
yes.
And would you share that with us?
That's amazing when you think about it. I was in Phoenix for the winter. I visited my son, and I joined the Korean War Veterans chapter out there. And I went to one of the chapter meetings, and a Korean American lady named Susan Key, who was very dedicated and thankful to the American troops because they saved her mother and father when they were young, and she never forgets it. So she interviewed us, and she wanted to interview me about my Korean experience, which we did. And then I told them as a result of the military, I became an air traffic controller. And she asked me if I ever had something interesting about being an air traffic controller. And I relayed the story, how we greeted them. And she looked at me with amazement. She says, I heard that story a week ago at Arizona State University. Because the speaker there, she said I have a professor friend, and they had a speaker there by the name of Tom Schaefer, and he gave the story that he was the pilot on that airplane.
Well,
And
he was the pilot on the airplane, but he was also...
he was a hostage, and the crew of the aircraft allowed him to be the pilot across into the United States. He's a fighter pilot. He got thousands of hours flying airplanes. And anyways, he gave this story, and she says, I heard that a week ago. I can't believe it. So the next thing I know, she calls me and says, I'm going to get together with you and Mr. Colonel Schaefer. So she put Colonel Schaefer and I together. And what a tremendous reunion. It was just exciting. It was emotional to both of us. I believe I was fortunate to have a picture of him and I and this Susan Key together. And he gave me some experiences that he had. He was the one that told me about mooning.
He was the mooner.
He was the mooner.
He's the mooner.
Yeah, and the interesting thing, we were both at the same age. We were both 50 years old at the time of the incident in '81.
Yes.
He was 50 and I was 50. And we talked about our background and things like that. And he was a very interesting man.
What a survivor. And you stayed in touch with Colonel Schaefer.
I did until he passed away about 3 years ago now.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was a bond.
Yeah, I saw him. I went back over again to Phoenix, and we got together. So we had a great relationship.
Bob, that is, you've got a lot of amazing stories. That one just happens to be my favorite. I love that one. And I thank you so much for being willing to come
I appreciate you asking me.
and to share. One thing we like to do in this podcast is we have the name Senior Moments, and what I really want to do with that is to kind of change the connotation of what a senior moment is.
Okay.
Okay, so I feel like a senior moment is something that we've achieved because we've lived long enough to have these great moments and experiences. On the flip side, though, we all do have the usual definition of senior moments, right?
Yes.
Do you have a senior moment that you'd share with us?
Well, it's a family senior moment.
Oh, the whole family had okay.
And at that time, I was living in Virginia, working in the Air Traffic Control Center in Virginia. And I've been there 12 years. And we just recently had a number 7 kid.
Number 7?
Yeah.
Okay.
And his name was Jim. His name is Jim. Anyways, my parents haven't met Jim yet. They wanted to see their grandson. So he's about 6 months at the time. So we piled in the car. We're going to drive from Boston up to Boston. And everything is all set. I shouldn't say car. It was a big station wagon. We got 7 kids in the back there. And we're about a mile up the road, and my wife turned and said to one of the daughters there, Betty, how's Jim doing? Because he's 6 months old. And she says, he's not in the car. We forgot. They forgot.
You forgot Jim. Jim's back home. He's back home in his car seat, just waiting for someone to come.
I couldn't believe it. I said, what? She says, yeah. I says, I wasn't about to say who was in charge because, you know, that's not the problem. The problem
priority is to turn around. Yeah.
So we turned around. My wife went in and I went in, and there he is laying on the living room floor.
Oh my gosh. How far had you gone?
We've gone about a mile.
Oh, before you...
So if my wife didn't ask this, we would have been probably in Baltimore.
And Jim would be home on the floor. Oh my gosh.
So that was one of our senior moments.
That's quite a senior... Well, thank you. So far, you've got the top senior moment. Bob, thank you so much for taking time.
You taking time and asking me to tell the story about a wonderful event that happened in my life.
And it's something I think everyone should know and everyone will appreciate. Thank you so much, Bob.
Thank you, Jeff, for inviting me.
Thank you.